Today's daf we're going to be learning is Avodah Zarah daf samach bet. We're going to start the 5th chapter and our final chapter of Avodah Zarah. We're going to have a Mishnah with 2 parts, okay? But basically both parts are going to be exactly identical. Each part's going to have 2 sections, and it's going to be, I wouldn't say identical, they're both parallel. Same deen, same law, same criteria, okay? So we're going to start with a socher et hapoel. An idolater hires a worker, la'asot imo b'yei nesach, to do a job relating to yei nesach, like carrying it, working with it, any kind of job. Scharo asur, any work, any salary that the person makes is forbidden to benefit from. You cannot benefit from salary from working in yei nesach. We're going to see exactly why this is. The Gemara is immediately going to ask, what's the reason, what's the problem, deliberate a little bit. But right now we'll just accept it as a given. Scharo la'asot imo melacha acheret, if he hired him to do some other job, af al pi she'amar lo ha'avir li chavit shel yei nesach mimakom lemakom, scharo mutal. Even if the person says, well, you get hired by an idolater to work in there as a cleaner. And while you're cleaning their house, they say, can you move those barrels of yei nesach from place to place, to somewhere else? That's permitted, your salary, because it's not like you're getting hired and getting direct benefit from the yei nesach. You were actually hired to do something else, so you're getting paid. Your salary isn't related to the yei nesach. And likewise, that was case 1, A and B. Now we have case 2, A and B. So a Jew rents out his donkey or her donkey for someone to bring yei nesach using the donkey. They want to use the donkey. Donkeys were used to carry things, to transport their yei nesach. Schara asur, the money you get from rent, is forbidden. Schara le'sheva leha, but if the idolater hired the donkey to sit on and to ride on, even if he puts his flask with yei nesach on the donkey while he's riding, even if he's not riding it, schara mutal. Okay, so then, again, the money you get for renting it is permitted. Because, again, they hired it particularly for the person, not for the yei nesach. So now the Gemara starts with their question. My taima scharo asur. Why is the salary forbidden? If it's because the yei nesach is forbidden to benefit from, and therefore also the money you get for it is forbidden, Hare orla. In other words, if you just say whatever is forbidden to benefit from, if you get a job relating to that and you're benefiting from it, then it's also the salary is forbidden. But that's not true, because Hare orla v'kilei akerem, the fruit, the first 3 years on the tree is forbidden, or kilei akerem, if you plant vines you plant crops right next to your vineyard, is also forbidden. Bahana'ah. Utnan, and it says in the Mishnah, mecharan v'kidesh b'demei mekudeshet. If you sell them and betroth the woman with that money, she's betrothed, meaning the money's yours. You are allowed to benefit from that money. So the money of Isurei Hana'ah doesn't transfer to salary relating to work, right? A salary for work surrounding that item. So that's not relevant. Ella, or even a sale of the forbidden item, the money collected from that sale, there's no forbidden hana'ah. Now that we actually learned is true for Avodah Zarah. So that's what Gemara is going to suggest now. Ella ho'il v'tofes et amav ke'avodah zarah. Maybe, or I should read it like this. Ella ho'il v'tofes et amav ke'avodah zarah. Option 2 is, well, Avodah Zarah, when you sell Avodah Zarah, the money you get is the same as Avodah Zarah and it's forbidden to benefit. So maybe you say, look, just like a sale of Avodah Zarah, the forbidden, right, the prohibition on the Avodah Zarah transfers to the money, maybe we'll say it transfers also to a salary relating to the Avodah Zarah. And here this is yei nesach, so it's like Avodah Zarah. But it's not really true either. This doesn't work because there's another thing, the tofeset amav. What is that? We've learned that. Shemitah produce also. If you sell Shemitah produce, the money you get for selling the Shemitah produce, that money has the sanctity of the fruits, which means once the fruits are no longer in the fields, you have to get rid of the fruits in your house. You also have to get rid of that money. Okay, get rid of could mean either, there's a debate. Does it mean make it hefker ownerless, or does it mean actually destroy it? Also, you can only use Shemitah produce for eating. You can't use it for, let's say, using it as for a dye or something like that. So same with your money, it has to be eaten only for food. Okay, so there's all sorts of limitations. So that works also for Shemitah, just like Avodah Zarah. It's Tofeset Damav. Also for Shemitah, it's Tofeset Damav. And yet, you see that it doesn't go for a salary or a rent. How do we know this? Well, Utnan, it says in the Mishnah. Now, here we're going to have two cases. One is not really relevant, because we'll see in a minute. And it's not relevant to what the Gemara is bringing it for. Ha'omer lepoel, if you say to a worker, here we're going to get to a worker who's working in your field in the Shemitah year, which again, you're not supposed to have a worker working in your field. If you say to a worker, but it depends what you're hiring them to do. If you say, take this money, and with that money, that's why there's this word bo, with it, pick me a fruit today from the field, or a vegetable today from the field. So, in this case, Rashi says, Lashon mecherhu, Timashma lakot li shavyo yerek. It sounds like, go pick for me the value of, if I give you $10, $10 worth of fruits, pick for me. Okay. In that case, it's basically like a sale. And what do we say? If it's a sale, well, the kedusha goes to the money. So in this case, scharo asul, okay, the money you make, right, the money that person makes for when you hired them to go pick you the fruit or the vegetable, is actually has kedusha shvit to it. It's forbidden. Again, forbidden means, in this case, it's not forbidden to benefit at all. It's just, it has all the sanctity of the Shemitah. But if you say, and this is the important part for our purposes, lekot li yarak hayom scharo mutal. If you say, collect for me a vegetable, or vegetables, right? And then you give them salary, and you say, collect for me vegetables, scharo mutal. Then that's just a salary for picking the vegetables, and that is not forbidden. If it's a salary or rent, it's not forbidden. If it's a sale, it's forbidden. So going back to our example then, if it's a sale of Avodah Zarah or a sale of Yei Nesach, it'll be forbidden, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a salary. Salary or rent, that's not forbidden. So we suggested two suggestions. Either it's because the Isur Hana transfers also to a salary. We prove that that's not the case. Then we said, well, maybe it's because the sanctity goes on to the money, right? In Avodah Zarah, it's actually the prohibition goes to the money of a sale. Maybe that would be true for a salary, and we just proved from Shemitah that's not the case. So we're left with, we don't really know why. In the Mishnah, it said that the salary is forbidden to benefit from. Well, for that, Rabbi Avau comes and quotes Rabbi Yochanan. Amar Rabbi Avau, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Knasu shekansu chachamim b'chamarim u'b'yei nesach. It's a penalty the rabbis instituted. They didn't want people working with people who were dealing with Yei Nesach. They didn't want that to happen, so they penalized people. And they said, okay, the Kansu Chachamim in Chamarim, in donkey riders, and in Yei Nesach. Well, what does he mean, donkey riders? So Yei Nesach, Hadam Ram. Yei Nesach, that's our case. So we have an answer already. We're done with our question. The answer is, the rabbis instituted this as a penalty. You can't benefit from any salary because they wanted to prevent people from doing this. Okay, what don't we understand? Chamarim maihi. Now we're going to go off of these chamarim. Who are these donkey riders? Donkey riders doing what? Which donkey riders did they penalize? So they're going to say Ditanya, and we're back to Shemitah. Chamarim shayu osim alacha beperot shvi'it. The donkey riders that would transport perot shvi'it from place to place, they would take people's Shemitah produce, scharan shvi'it. Their penalty is what? That their salary is shvi'it. Okay, so we don't yet know what that means, and we're going to see, but it's a penalty they instituted. Why they instituted a penalty for these people is an excellent question. The Rishonim all go off in different directions. Some people think that they actually didn't do anything wrong at all, and they just didn't want people to be dealing with Shemitah produce as a concern that maybe they would end up doing business dealings with it. Some people think they're transporting them for business, and you're not allowed to sell Shemitah produce, and that's why they forbade them. Again, they're not the ones selling it, but they're the ones transporting it, and they're helping the Ovrei Aveira, the people who are sinning. There's a bunch of other explanations given, but we'll leave it at that for right now. So now we want to know Mais Charan Shvi'it. And the structure is going to work like this. They're going to bring two suggestions and reject them, much like we started our sugya, where we wanted to know what the reason for the salary being forbidden in our Mishnah. We gave two suggestions, rejected them, and then brought a third, which is just, it was a penalty of the rabbis. This time we're going to bring two suggestions, reject them, and then Abai and Rav are each going to go back and say, no, I can explain this one, and the other one says, I can explain the other one. Okay, so that's our structure. Ilema, if you say, which we know is going to be rejected, right? So Maischaran Shvi'it, what is this? Their salary is Shemitah, is Shvi'it. Ilema diavina lesachar mi peirot Shvi'it. Maybe it means the penalty is they get paid in Shemitah produce, which is not the best way to get paid, right? Because Shemitah produce is limited in its use and it's limited in time. Well, it's a problem because then the person who's paying the donkey rider is paying a salary in, right? He's basically doing business with, he's paying his loan back with Shemitah produce. And a Torah, we said, you can't use Shemitah produce for all sorts of things like paying your loan back because it says it's for you to eat and not to do business with. And that's basically business. So it can't be that. Ela de kadosh scharam b'kedushat shvi'it. It's that their salary is sanctified b'kedushat shvi'it. Okay, meaning whatever money you get paid to be a donkey rider to transport Shemitah produce, you'll just get paid in money. But whatever money you get is going to have the sanctity of the Shemitah produce, which again means it's limited. To which the Gemara says, but even that's not a good possibility because umi kadosh, is that really sanctified? V'hatanya, it actually should be v'hatnan, it says in the Mishnah. This is the Mishnah we quoted before. Okay, they flip the order here, by the way, and then they say lakot liyarak bo hayom scharo asur. But they quote first the case they want, which is if you hire someone to collect your vegetables for you, then the salary they make is permitted, meaning it doesn't have the sanctity. So that doesn't work either. And only if you say lakot liyarak hayom, and that's a sale, but that we don't really need. Okay, why they switch the order and it appears one way, and one way the other way. I didn't look in the original Mishnah and see how it's quoted, but which way somebody switched the order at some point. So Amar Abai. Abai is going to explain. I'll tell you how this works. Lo'olam yahavina le'sachar mi peirot shvi'it. He goes back to the first answer and he says, you get paid in Shemitah produce. Udikakashalach, now you asked, le'ochlav lo l'schora. You said, but you can't do that with Shemitah produce. Well, diyave niya le'betzad hetel. There is a way that you can pay with Shemitah produce, and we're going to show you how. Okay, they're going to give an example from Maser Sheni. We're going to move now into Amud Bet. Keditznan, as it says in the Mishnah about Maser Sheni, but we're going to say the same thing is true for Shemitah produce, that you could do it in this kind of a way, and that's what we mean. So these Chamarim are going to get paid in this kind of way, where we're allowed to pay someone using Shemitah produce. So how does this work? Well, the Mishnah says, Lo yomar adam lechavero, you can't say to someone, okay, now we're at the top of Amud Bet, Ha'alei li perot halalu li Yerushalayim. Listen, I'm too lazy. I don't want to take my Maser Sheni produce to Jerusalem. You take it for me to Jerusalem, because remember, it can only be eaten in Jerusalem. And you can't use it to pay someone's salary, which is how it's going to be similar to Shemitah, because you can only bring it to Jerusalem to eat there. But you say, take my payroll to Jerusalem, lechalek, and then we'll split them. When you get there, it sounds almost like a sharecropper. You work for me and you'll take a percentage of the land. Right? You work for me and you'll get a portion of it in Jerusalem. That you can't do, because that's like paying in Maser Sheni produce. Aval omer lo, but what you can say is, ha'alem la'ochlam u'lishtotam b'Yerushalayim. Take them up to eat and drink in Jerusalem. V'notnim zelazeh matana shel chinam. As you can say like this, can you take my Maser Sheni to Jerusalem? And when we get there, I'll invite you over for a meal. Okay? And you can eat some of it with me. That's okay, because they're each basically doing a gift for free. That's not viewed as you're getting paid for doing this. It's viewed as you're doing a favor for me and I'll do a favor for you. It's in the realm of favors of, they even call it manat chinam, right? It's free gifts basically, because you're going to bring it anyway and I'm going to invite you anyway. And it just happens to be that these will go together sort of, but it's a way of avoiding the problem and doing it. So theoretically, what they're saying is, and this goes back to the way Abai explains it, the chamarim, the do malacha and peirot shvi'it, they can get paid in this manner, where the guy can say, go bring it to there, and when we get there, I'll invite you over to eat with me. That's the only way you can do it. They can't get paid a proper salary. The Rava Amar, Rava's going to now go back to the the second explanation that was rejected. He's going to explain, La'olam, no, it really means that the sachar, you pay them in money, not in produce, like Abai said. You pay them in money, but the money has sanctity of the Shemitah year. Well, now you said, what about a worker? Right? We're comparing now a poel to a donkey rider. Those are not the same. Poel de lo nakash agre lo kansu rabanan. A poel who doesn't get a large salary. So because a worker in the field doesn't get a lot of money, because they don't get a lot of money, the rabbis didn't see a need to institute a knas for them. But chamarim, de nakash igrayu, but chamarim who get paid a lot of money. Interesting. Number one, we have to think about this. Why do donkey riders get paid so much more money? I'm assuming it's because they had to travel distances and go away from home. The other workers, like a day worker, they go to work, right? And donkey rider, you have to deal with the animal donkeys, you have to feed them, right? There's all sorts of stuff to be dealing with, and I guess it was more money. So a donkey rider, who makes a lot of money, kansu rabbanan bihu. So the rabbis instituted a knas. This is also another thing to think about. Why do we only penalize people who are making a lot of money, right? I assume it's because there's not so much incentive to do a job that's not a lot of money. So if they want to disincentivize people from doing this, anyway, there's not a lot of incentive. They really need to disincentivize the people who are making a lot of money. Now we have to go back, though, because what did we do so far? Let's just go back to the beginning. We started with a Mishnah with two cases. Notice what two cases? And they were the exact same law. Someone who hires a worker and someone who rents out a donkey. Now notice, those are the two things we're saying here that are not comparable, and that's what we're going to go back to. Because here we're saying they only penalized one and not the other, right? Then we said, what was the issue in the Mishnah? Why is the salary forbidden? We suggested two suggestions, rejected them, and then went and said, it's a knas, the rabbis instituted for Yei Nesach, and by the way, they also instituted it for donkey riders. What were the donkey riders? That we had to figure out. Had to do with donkey riders in the Shemitah year, that we proved from a Braita, and their penalty is, donkey riders of Shemitah produce, their penalty is scharan shvi'it. And we had to understand what is scharan shvi'it, suggested two, rejected them both, and then Abai and Rava each reinstituted each one and explained why it wasn't difficult. So, in Rava's explanation, we have this distinction between donkey riders and workers. So the Gemara goes back and says, what about our Mishnah? It didn't differentiate between donkey riders and workers, penalize them all. Right? It's also a penalty. Well, Chumr di Yei Nesach Shani. Yei Nesach is just more strict in general. And therefore, in Yei Nesach, they were strict on both of them, right? Both the donkey riders and also the field workers. But when it came to the Shemitah produce, there wasn't as much of a reason to be so strict, and therefore they were only strict on the donkey riders who make a bigger salary. And again, it really goes back to that question, what was actually wrong? Was it actually wrong what they were doing? Was it just preventative? Right? Was it punitive or preventative? That's really the debate among the Rishonim. And if you say it's punitive, how bad was the punitive? What exactly were they doing wrong? Okay, Ibayalahu. Right? I didn't bring you all the range of opinions. Ibayalahu. Scharo l'stam yenamahu. What if you hire people for stam yenam? Until now we were discussing about the idolater hired the Jew to work with wine. It was actually Yei Nesach. It was used as a libation. What if they hire you for stam yenam, just for regular wine of a non-Jew, and you don't know if it was worshipped up or not? You don't know if it's Yei Nesach. Mi amrinan, here are the two sides of the question. Do we say, Kevan d'isuro chamor ki Yei Nesach? Anyway, we're strict with it just like Yei Nesach, forbidden to benefit from just like Yei Nesach. Scharo nami asur, so the salary will also be forbidden. O Dilma, or maybe, if you remember back in Daf Lamed and Lamed Aleph, we learned Ho'il v'tumato kil. It's the tuma of it is more lenient. Af scharo nami kil. What does that mean? The tuma of it. Well, if you remember, the rabbis decreed that Avodah Zarah is impure like the dead. Ki zivchei metim. Remember zivchei metim? We had that. It has the same. It's metame and ohel if there's Avodah Zarah there. Okay, also true for Yei Nesach. But if it's stam yenam, it's not metame. It's not tameh automatically. Only tameh like a mashkeh. If you have a drink, right, that comes in contact with impurity, it is a drink. Wine is a drink. Stam yenam will contact impurity like regular drinks. But it's not impure because it's Avodah Zarah. So maybe because we're lenient there, maybe we'll be lenient also with the salary. So let's see. We have a source, Tashma. Let's learn from here. Tahu Gavra da Agar Arbe. There was a person who rented out a boat, Listam Yanam, for an idolater to bring their wine. But it wasn't clear their wine was Yei Nesach. He paid him with wheat. So the guy came before Rav Chisda and said, what can I do with this? Can I benefit? Amarle zil kalinu v'kavrinu b'kivrei. Go burn it all the wheat, and then bury the ashes in the ground. Okay, that seems very clear. You cannot benefit from salary gained from rent or salary you make from stam yenam either. So now the Gemara wants to just go off on what exactly Rav Chisda told him to do. Burn it and bury it. So first they say, Le'malehu badrinu. Why didn't you just say scatter it? To which they say, no, because atubuli de takala. If the wheats are out there, if the grains are out there scattered, somebody might use them and benefit from them, and they're forbidden to benefit. So that obviously isn't a good suggestion. But then they say, no. Maybe they're even one of these. This is what we meant. Why don't you burn it and then scatter the ashes? Now you might remember we had this with Avodah Zarah. If you burn it and scatter the ashes, what's the issue? There's a machloket. Is it okay or not? Because remember, zev gorem. Okay, dilma mezablehu. Maybe people will use it as fertilizer, and then if you say zev golem, if you have heter and isser together, because the fertilizer is happening not just because of the ashes, but other things as well, it's forbidden. Then you can't benefit from that either. Really, it depends which way you hold on that machloket. But I guess Rav Chisda was machmir and wanted to side on that side that it's forbidden. Another possibility: you could have just buried it as is. Then no one's going to access it from under the ground. Milotnan, didn't we learn that you can do that with things that are forbidden to benefit from? As it says. Okay, now we're going to learn. Okay, maybe I'll bring you the pasuk first. There's a pasuk about someone who gets killed by the court. Okay, harugei beitim. It says, Lo talim yivlato ala eitz ki kavor tikberenu. This is after someone gets stoned. You hang them on a tree. It says, don't leave the body on the tree. Ki kavor tikberenu, because you have to bury it. Now, where they get from this pasuk, but we'll see the different possibilities. They're going to learn from this pasuk that you have to bury all the accoutrements that were used to kill the person. Okay? Either because it says kavor tikberenu, double language, not just the person, also the items, or because it says on the tree and bury it. So bury really means the person, but on the tree, also the tree gets buried. Okay? The parts of the tree, I guess you cut the tree down and then bury the tree. So from here they learn parts have to be buried. So now the Gemara assumes here that the parts have to be buried because they're forbidden to benefit from. And then that's going to be comparable, because we're going to see here all those parts you bury, but you don't burn them. Okay, so echad even shenitzkabo, the stone that you were stoned with, or echad et shenitla alav, or the tree that the person was hung on, ve'echad sayif shnei ragbo, or the sword that they were killed with, or echad sudar shenechnakbo, or if it was strangulation, then the cloth they used to strangle the person. Kulam nikbarim imo. All of those are buried with the person. So what do you see, right? These are all the different harugei beitin, the 4 types of ways they kill people. Okay, you don't see streifa here, but streifa also, there was strangulation in the streifa, in the burning. First they would strangle them, then they would pour this hot lead down their throat. Anyway, with the hot lead, obviously there's nothing left, it's in the body. All these parts get buried with the people. So what do you see? Right? They get buried, but you don't have to burn them. So why didn't he burn the wheat? By the way, this assumes, as I said before, and I want to just point this out, it's just interesting. This assumes that they're forbidden b'hana'at, right? That you can't benefit, and that's why we're making this comparison. The Rambam, though, says that the reason why we bury these things, he says the reason is we don't want things floating around the world that people will say, oh, that was the one that was used to kill so-and-so, because they don't want people mentioning all the time that these people were killed by the court. It's embarrassing for the person's name. So because of that, that's why we bury them, and it has nothing to do with Isur Na'ah. Obviously, the sugya doesn't go in that direction, right? How the Rambam reads the sugya is a good question. But anyway, how do we differentiate? Why did Rav Chisda say you have to burn them when in these things you don't need to burn them? That's because they bury them in the court. Okay, what does this mean, they bury them in the court? So it could mean either they bury them by the court, and therefore, let's just read one more line. Everybody knows if they uncover some things under the ground there, they're going to know it came from someone who was killed by the court. Either because the court announces everything and everybody knows, and therefore if they're near the guy's kever and they find this, item, let's say they dug a little, I don't know why they'd be digging in a cemetery, but if they were to have dug and found it, they know it belongs to this person who was killed. or because, if you remember from Sanhedrin, if you learned Sanhedrin, these people had a special cemetery that was just, weren't buried with everybody else. So if their items were buried with them, everybody knows in that cemetery, all the stuff that's buried is forbidden to benefit from. So you don't need to burn it. But hacha lo muchamilta. Right here, if the person just buries it in some random place in the ground and somebody digs up the ground and finds all this wheat, they'll say, oh, maybe someone stole it and buried it here, and then they'll just take it and use it, not knowing that it was forbidden to benefit. And that's why. Now, this raises a whole question. The Ritva asks this question, which is an obvious question, which is, if you find something under the ground, okay, if you learn Bava Metzia, second chapter, you find something under the ground, and it's, all this wheat there, and you think maybe someone stole it or someone put it there, either which way, you're not allowed to touch it. It belongs to someone, even if they stole it, right? It's theirs, or at least you don't know if it was exactly stolen and who it belongs to, but who are you to say, oh, I can take this? So the Ritva says, it must be somehow you assume there was Yeush and that the owners gave up of ever seeing it again. I don't know how you would know that. It's a bit of a difficulty with this answer. But in any case, they differentiate and they say that's why we now understood why they need to burn it and then bury it. Because can't burn it and scatter because of Zev Zegorim and it'll fertilize, and you can't bury it without burning because maybe someone will find it and use it, and since it's forbidden b'hana'ah, no one will know that. It doesn't say have a sign on it, can't benefit from, so therefore you can't. Okay, now we're going to end with the sugya that we're not going to complete today, but we seem to be here because we were talking about Perot Shvi. We're back to that, and transferring Kedusha from one thing to the other, and with sales and things like that. So we're going to have a different case here. A particular case that happened, Debei Rabbi Yanai, in the house of Rabbi Yanai, they wanted to help poor people. So what would they do? In the Shemitah year, the poor people had all this produce, but they couldn't eat it all before Zman Biur, and then they had to either make it ownerless according to some, or maybe burn it according to others, destroy it. So what would they do? Yasvei Perot Shvi me'aniyim. They would borrow Perot Shvi from aniyim on the Shemitah year. And then they would, use it. Maybe they have more people to give it out to or whatever. They would borrow it from them. And then they would return the money the following year. Okay? And then they would give them new produce that wasn't Shemitah produce. It's a great situation. What's the problem? Well, we said that things that you, chalipin, you do a trade of Shemitah produce for money, let's say, or in this case, Shemitah produce for other produce that you'll get later. Well, the Kedusha Shvi goes on the other item. So when he gave back Perot Shvi, Perot that weren't Shvi, he gave back produce in the 8th year, presumably without Kedusha Shvi, it shouldn't have Kedusha Shvi because it was given in exchange for things that had Kedusha Shvi to them. So Atu Amar Leila Rabbi Yochanan. So they went for Rabbi Yochanan and said, is this okay? Amar Lahu Ya'utem Avdim. Yeah, this is actually legit. Ukinegdam be'etnan mutal. And just the same with an etnan, it's also permitted. What's an etnan? An etnan is a gift that a prostitute gets. That gift can't be given to buy a sacrifice in the temple. Or if she got an animal, she can't sacrifice that animal in the temple. That's disgraceful, right? Despicable. So, what do we say about an etnan, though? Here we're going to see, D'Tanya, says in a Braita, and we're going to say the same thing. Now, what's the same thing? What's the issue here? Why is this different than what we saw before? Because there's a gap of time. There's a gap of time between the time that the person, he got the payroll from them, and then he gave them payroll back at a different time. When it's an immediate trade, the sanctity goes on the other item. But when there's a break in time, it doesn't. And that's what we're going to see with the etna. First, we're going to read the Braita. The Braita doesn't really make sense. The Gemara is going to say this Braita makes no sense, and then the Gemara is going to fix it. D'Tanya. And then it's going to be exactly comparable. Natan la v'lo ba'aleh. If he gives the woman a gift, but doesn't end up having relations with her, or ba'aleha, or he has relations with her v'lo natan la, or doesn't give her the gift. Etnena mutal. Her gift that she receives is permitted. Okay, you can already see all the problems. Natan la v'lo ba'aleh. Okay, if he gave her a gift and then didn't have relations with her, obviously pshita. Kevet lo ba'aleh matana ba'almu diavla. It was just a gift. He didn't engage in prostitution with her. Obviously, that's not a gift of a prostitute. And v'tu, and furthermore, ba'aleh v'lo natan la. How could you say the enan is permitted in that case if he had relations with her and didn't give her a gift? Well, halo yavlav lomidi. He didn't give her anything. V'kevet lo natan la ma'et nena mutal. Since he didn't give her, what does it mean? Her etnan is mutar. There is no etnan. How could you say the gift she got is permitted when she didn't even get a gift? Okay, so that's obviously not what the Braita means. Ela, hachi kamra. This is what it means. natan la v'achar kach ba'aleha. If he gave her the money on one day and then a different time came back to her and had relations with her, then it's mutar. Because then, again, we don't see this direct link between the two. O ba'aleha v'achar kach natan la. Or you have relations with her, and then, or ba'aleha, and achar kach natan la. And then he gave her the money much later. Then also the add-on is permitted. And nena mutar. Okay, and now we see the comparison and why when Rabbi Yochanan said it's good what they did, and it nana works in the same way, that as long as there's this gap of time, we don't see them as directly related, and both these things are permitted. They're obviously two totally different things, but they're both permitted. Okay, with that, we're going to end for today. Continue that sugya with the etnan tomorrow. So what did we do? Again, I kind of reviewed already, but we had these two: rent, right, hire a worker, or rent a donkey out for Nesach purposes. It's forbidden unless you're hired out for something else and happen to just do something with Nesach. We asked what's the reason, suggested two possibilities, rejected them, went with Rabbi Yochanan who said it's a knas. Rabbi Yochanan also mentioned it's a knas also b'chamarim. What's the knas? At the end we see what it is, right? Two possibilities of Rav and Abai. According to Rav, we had to say, well, it's different though than Nesach because there we're going to be strict with the chamarim and not with the workers, whereas by Nesach we're strict with the workers and the donkey, right? The workers in the field and the donkey riders. Then we asked, what about Stam Yenam? And we said from a story we saw, we're going to be strict as well. With that story, we had some questions. Why did he have to burn it and then bury it? Why do you have to do both those things? And we explained. And then we ended with this story of Rabbi Yanai, who we saw that even though Kedusha Shvi transfers to the money, transfers to an item that you're trading it for, if there's a gap in time, like giving the pay, right, taking the loan from them the first year, taking money, the produce, and then returning it back to them later, then it's okay. And then the Kedusha Shvi doesn't transfer, just like with the Etnan. With that, we finish for today. Wishing everyone a good day.